Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another fantastic episode here in our Max Colonization series. We currently have a couple of rockets doing some early exploration, and we're going to continue that theme throughout most of today's episode, but there's something a little weird happening. Here is our home planetoid. We've also discovered Aquazon, Neutralina, Frostalin, Ariel, and Gasiel. But if you look up here, for some reason, right before I exit out of the game during the last episode, it said we had discovered a new planetoid, this one called Floodina. Now, normally the planetoids only appear in this list once you've been close to them or seen them on the Oversea Planetoid screen. But not only have we not been to the surface of Floodina, it doesn't even exist on the star map yet. Well, at least that I can see. What I'm guessing has happened is the experimental Adios 2 is about to park right next to Floodina. Or perhaps the curious Sputnik is going to get close enough to reveal it, and the game sort of got ahead of itself. Speaking of which, it's time for some renaming ceremonies. The curious Sputnik, being commanded by the very capable John Archer, is doing a great job collecting all those databanks. And I completely missed an incredible opportunity to name this rocket. Hats off to everybody in the comments who suggested that John Archer should command none other than the NX-01 Enterprise, well, of course. How serendipitous to have John Archer in the Enterprise. I mean, you can't make this up. The experimental Adios is currently heading next to this unknown object. Because it has a cartographic module, it can head into the fog of space here, unlike the Enterprise that can't. There are a couple more unknown objects within the Adios's range. We could go check out this one. But I think what we're going to do after we explore here, we're going to head back and outfit this rocket with a telescope. And the telescope will allow us to expand that vision a lot further, although we will not be able to explore into this fog of space here. No big deal. But now for its renaming. That's right. Welcome to the christening of the ESS Susan, named in honor of our space program mascot. Hi, Susan. While we continue to explore the stars, I figured I'd give you a couple updates around the colony. You may have noticed at the end of the last episode that I installed 6 solar panels. We don't have a battery box or anything for these solar panels. They're just connected directly to the grid, and it really help offset the 2,400 watts required to run 2 Oxalite refineries. In fact, if we go to the last cycle's daily report, it shows that we've created 7,800 kilojoules, and we're using almost all of it at 7,500. So it might be smart for us to set up a small battery box for these, but I don't want it to take up too much space, because as you can see, we're running out of places to put new systems. So every little bit of space is going to matter. So I think something small right here will be just what the doctor ordered. Now, although not everybody agrees with their usage, I choose to use smart batteries connected to the solar panels for a couple of reasons. When your power grid is all connected to smart batteries, all these smart batteries sort of share the same load, and they fire their automation signals based on that load. For instance, in the natural gas, this smart battery turns on when the batteries get below 50%. So if we were to put a 40 kilojoule jumbo battery, or even a 100 kilojoule battery, such as the ones connected to the rocket platforms, it would throw that equilibrium off a little bit. In fact, I've ran a colony using those 100 kilojoule batteries off the rocket platforms, and what ends up happening is you don't use 80% of the kilojoules on that battery, because every time these smart batteries get to 50% or 60% or whatever you have the automation set on, it turns their corresponding generators on. There's arguments to be made for using the jumbo battery and the rocket platform battery in the eventuality that all the other power generators stop producing power and the primary grid loses all its energy. It would have the backup energy being stored inside these jumbo batteries. But in this case, we're going to put down several of these smart batteries. And by using smart batteries, it gives us the ability to quickly see how full our grid is. We won't be sent astray at looking at a larger battery holding more power and not realizing the rest of our grid is still sitting at 10%. But there is definitely more than one way to do this, so I invite you to do the method that you like the most. You may have also noted that we got a bit cheeky by putting the window tiles here. This was another space-saving method to use the space underneath our rocket platforms and allow the light to come through it. The rockets have reached their destination, And because Susan has a cartographic module, you can see that they're able to not only get into the fog of war, but allows you to view all adjacent tiles as well. Unfortunately, all we found was an ice asteroid, which can be convenient, but I was rather hoping it would have explained the Floodina thing. We'll take Susan and send them home, and then give them the retrofit with the telescope. Over on the Enterprise, Captain John Archer has completed 71 databanks, so they still have a ways to go. But they've also reached their destination, but they still have a range remaining of 16 tiles. And remember, we have a rovers module, so why don't we go ahead and plop our first rover down on Aquazon. Now, specifically, what we're looking for is called the Gilded Field or the Gilded Asteroid Field, something like that. And it is what has our fullerene. Once we have full... Oh, look at this. It's Floodina. How did we discover Floodina? It's nowhere near here. And we can oversee the planetoid surface. Why can we see this surface? I'm so confused. We got some copper ore here, a lot of water. I'm guessing this is one of the water planets, but I was kind of thinking that Aquazon was going to be the water planet. But now that I see the little poke shell standing on the planetoid, I'm starting to think this is the saltwater planetoid. How did this happen? Anyways, what I was trying to say before I squirreled myself by the discovery of Floodina, we want to find that gilded asteroid because it'll have fullerene, which we can use to create supercoolant. Now we're going to throw down a thin layer of petroleum, and we've also added some steel radiant gas pipes here. That way, whenever the carbon dioxide goes through here to cool down these spaces, it'll also pass by here and cool down the batteries just a little bit. These smart batteries are made out of gold, so they will go all the way up to 125C. So I don't think we're going to have to worry about it too much. We're also going to place little pieces of automation wire right on the batteries. Even though we're not using the automation on them, we're doing it to get rid of the little warning message here. And our battery box is complete. And because we use smart batteries, we can see exactly how much power is remaining on our grid. Right now, about 25%. Now I kind of want to make a battery meter, huh? Meanwhile, over on Frostalin, mistakes may have been made. Miko, you can't stand there. You need to go over here to build those. I completely forgot to put in the insulated tile around this hydrogen vent, and it has subsequently started to erupt. And I say started, but it's been erupting for quite some time. Oops. I think we're gonna open the doors for a little bit, huh? Actually, it'd be really great to siphon all that hydrogen and use it for power, wouldn't it? Yeah, let's do that instead. And just in case, we do have a triage cot here. I mean, absolutely no chance that we'll ever end up using it, but just in case, we'll create a second and wait the eternity for this hydrogen vent to stop erupting. The good thing is it doesn't erupt but once every 2 cycles, so we should be okay. Now on the heat front, it's not good. It's gonna be a while for me to fix this. Frostalin's cold, but apparently the hydrogen vent is enough to stifle that chill. In fact, I think the best way to handle this is to put a dupe in a suit and have them go teleport to the other planetoid. Because otherwise it's just too hot for anybody over there to work on it without suits. And to make sure that the other dupes don't even dare try to work on it, we're going to put them on vacation mode. It's just a schedule with nothing but sleep and downtime. Thank you, Andy. What a team player. Andy just decided they need a break, so just in case, we're going to take them out of the suit. Oops, not their clothes, their suit. Andy, put your clothes back on. Nice job, and kudos to Andy. We've got the whole thing sealed. Unfortunately, it's still going to be a little while before Miko and J-Ray can come over here. But with a job well done, it's time to send Andy home. We haven't inspected this? All right, Andy, come on. Time to go home to your own cot. And now that Andy is home, we can instantly have them unequip their suit. Oh, they left their clothes over there too.
Honey!
What?
Where's my super suit?
Besides that train wreck, we actually have a couple of updates here. The ESS Susan has made it home, and the Enterprise is in orbit of Aquazon. So we're going to go ahead and deploy Rover's module. And as expected, it is the salty planet. I don't know where to land Rover, though. Oh, this looks like a nice spot here. And John Archer himself is up to 245 databanks and still has about 25 cycles worth of food. But without a spare rover, we'll go ahead and put them in orbit of our home planetoid just so when they are low on those calories, we can land them, get them refitted, and then send them back to orbit. Incidentally, if you're wondering, they still have over 1,300 kilos worth of oxalite. We sent them with 2 tons because I want to be able to track how much oxalite we're going to be using for some of these missions, so that I can more precisely control how much oxalite we deliver to the rocket. Rover has successfully landed, and now we are going hunting. It's important to note that Rover can't do anything too complicated. For instance, because granite requires hard digging, Rover's not going to be able to do it. So we're going to have to go in somewhere that is easy enough for Rover to do. We're also going to deconstruct Rover's lander because it's going to give us 400 kilos worth of steel here. So one day when we do land a dupe here, we'll have 400 kilos worth of steel to start off on that rocket platform. It's been a couple of cycles and the temperature here has calmed down quite a bit. In fact, I think we can take our local residents off of vacation mode. We've put a couple of gas pumps at the highest point, or more specifically, where the hydrogen's going to float to eventually. And we're going to bring it all the way down here and siphon it right into the hydrogen generator. And because eventually all that hydrogen will be gone, we're going to go ahead and use a filter instead of the automation. So all the hydrogen will go directly here and everything else will get just dumped. Now's the time to make some retrofits to the ESS Susan. First thing we're going to do is get rid of this cartographic module. It didn't come in very handy. And in its place, we're going to add a beautiful large liquid fuel tank, and that'll give this rocket the same amount of range as the Enterprise. And that is a beautiful range of 20, which is really going to help during our exploration. Inside, we also made a couple of retrofits. We wanted to get the telescope nice and close to this rocket window. We had to move a couple of things around. It is now very tight in here. We were still able to maintain our mess hall, our barracks, and our washroom by moving the refrigerator over next to the bed and the battery into the bathroom. All we're really waiting on here is for the fuel tank to be finished and to refill back up with pickled meal. So we've started another mealwood farm. We have the mealwood being produced in here in the Dreco farm that we're able to get some meal lice off of, but we want to capitalize a lot quicker on that. But in order to do that, I need to actually select pickled meal so the duplicates will go grab the meal lice. We're also going to make sure that we store the pickled meal in our deep freezer. That way there's no chance of it going off before we're ready to use it in our next mission. We've also completed our battery meter. Now it's very rudimentary because we're only using 5 smart batteries here, so we can't get too precise. The way it functions is each battery is set to emit a red signal whenever the power on the grid is within its range. This one, anytime it's above 1. This one, anytime it's above 20, 40, 60, and 80. It'd be really nice if we had, say, 12 of these, because then you could set one specifically on 0 and one specifically on 100, and then separate them by 10s instead of the 20s they are now. This way, the entire meter would have a 0, 100, and then increments of 10 all the way up. But it's not bad for a quick look. I can see here we're between 60 and 80% power right now. John Archer has created 300 data banks, and they have returned to the orbit of our home planetoid, which this gives me an idea. Wouldn't it be nice to have the full-fledged petroleum engines? Why don't we go ahead and unlock that, shall we? And then we'll be able to give these rockets some really nice upgrades. Unfortunately, there's another problem. This is only a ceiling height of 29 tiles. The petroleum engine supports a rocket height of 35. This is going to present an issue, because I really don't feel like rebuilding these Spacefarer modules. So I'd love to hear if you have any recommendations on how I move this rocket platform down and still keep this same Spacefarer module. Now, I could always go grab the Blueprints mod, although I've heard that it's a little buggy since the new patches. Help me, random YouTube commenter. You're my only hope. Frostaline's starting to return to normal. This is about the only spot that doesn't give us the scalding. Everything else is slowly starting to drop in temperature, which is the way of Frostaline. We also have some beautiful hydrogen being pumped all the way to our hydrogen generator, which I suppose I need to bridge this on, otherwise we're going to have issues with the hydrogen backing up too much and then going into our oxygen supply. One bridge there with a separation. Perfect. So whenever there's not hydrogen, it'll pull from this line here. The alternative is I could have thrown in another hydrogen generator, but I don't think it's necessary. This is just going to provide us a lot of power for a very long time. Over on our home planetoid, we need to do somewhat of a culling. In almost all of our ranches, there's a place like this that just has way too many critters. Great for plastic production, but not great for frame rates. So every once in a while, we just need to come in here and do one of these. Likewise in here as well. Sorry, Pips. And avert your eyes. Avert your eyes! Right now, we're at 1.7 million calories worth of barbecue. We'll come back in a few minutes and see what all those critters produce. Speaking of food, we are ready with about 36 cycles worth of pickled meal. So we're going to grab it and put it all in this fridge. And that way it'll be loaded into this fridge. Because that fridge is set at a priority of 4, this one's set at a priority of 5. Once it's loaded up, I think we're ready to send Lady Ruff back. In fact, we're loaded up with 450 kilos of oxalite. Combine that with our brand new large liquid fuel tank, and we have that range of 20 tiles. The question is, where are we going to explore first? I think we're going to go with the largest sector of unknown objects, and that's going to be right about here. That way we could explore this little area, find out if one of these is our gilded asteroid, because some super coolant would be really nice right about now. It would make a lot of things so much easier. Every last cooling loop that we have on this planetoid would be better served with supercoolant. And look at this. For 2 episodes in a row, we're heading back to space. Huh? And before I forget, we need to find Lady Ruff and make sure they're allowed to do research. Otherwise, they would just stare at the telescope. And that's not what we want. An update on Captain John Archer. They're down to about 5 cycles worth of food. I'm not going to forget to land this rocket. I just want to squeeze as many data banks out of this trip as possible. I'm not going to forget. I promise. Okay, maybe. I just can't stop looking at the sheer amount of hydrogen that was dumped in here before I noticed. I mean, look at all this available power. I also wanted to give a shout out to the comments who recommended that I used a metal tile inside the deep freezer, and I normally do. I just echoed that one up. But the metal tile really helps with keeping the temperature in here consistent. It adds more thermal mass, not to mention the transfer of temperature from the hydrogen is a lot more effective to the metal tile than it is to the chlorine environment. Looks like it's time to land John early. They're down to 3,000 calories. That's not the concern. They ran out of their oxalite. They're still doing okay. We're not in the emergency landing stages yet, but it's a good number to know though, because I think we launched with about 40 cycles worth of excellent fruit. That means 2 tons of oxalite lasted about 40 cycles for 1 duplicate. So now we have a rough idea of how much oxalite to load up, depending on how much food we send them with. We'll go ahead and put John's suit on, and then we'll land the Enterprise. Get out of the way, Susan. Susan, get out of the way. It's important to note, though, this is not Susan. This is now Susan the Second. This Susan's only 28 cycles old. Of course, in that case, this might be like Susan the 13th. It's kind of cool, though, but the rocket takes all the coal that Susan's been laying and turning it into refined carbon. When the rockets take off or land, all that coal gets superheated into refined carbon. Speaking of Susan, they've made it to their coordinates, and so far have revealed another ice asteroid. Once again, I think the Ed seed has cursed us. If I were to guess, the gilded asteroid's going to be way out here. And the next one was another forested ore. Question is, where do we want to go next? Let's try down in this cluster here. We'll be able to move in a little bit further before we've hit our max range and have to head back to our home planetoid. But with all those awesome databanks back, you can see that our virtual planetarium is sitting with over 200 databanks. Plus, we have another 200 sitting in here. So we're going to be able to knock out a little bit of that tier 4 research. We're probably going into the drill cone next, because when we do find that gilded asteroid, we're going to be able to want to mine it. So in the comments below, I'm going to be looking for your advice on how do we move these rocket platforms without having to recreate the Spacefarer module when we put our larger petroleum engines on them. And while we have enough fuel to launch the Enterprise again, probably 3-4 more times, we have a backlog of about 5 tons. So we're going to have to wait a little while to let our petroleum reserves kick back in. Which has got me thinking, we have 1.7 tons worth of carbon dioxide in every single tile here. We may want to siphon off some more carbon dioxide so we can create another 4 ranches worth of slicksters so we can create more oil, which in turn will allow us to create more petroleum. There's a couple of downsides. One, we're going to be using more space that we really don't have on this planetoid. Second, we only have 14 dupes, and adding another 4 ranches worth of slicksters is going to increase the amount of errands once again. I do believe our oxygen system can handle more, but we're starting to get to that point where we're going to be hitting max capacity. So next up, I definitely believe we're going to be taming this saltwater geyser and capturing a lot of that water. The disadvantage again is that's going to require more errands and more power over here on Frostaland, so we're probably going to have to throw another duplicate or two over here, which means they're going to need another food supply, well, at least until we get all of our berry sludge going. Once we have our berry sludge going, then we'll have enough food for all of our rockets and plenty for this colony here. Incidentally, I wasn't able to do much with Rover. I was kind of too busy dealing with the emergencies on Frostaland, so we didn't get as far into the asteroid as I was expecting. That's another thing we're going to have to do. Put a nice memorial in on every planetoid that we have a rover that sacrifices themselves for the greater good. Reminder, Clay, we'd really like to charge Rover. But I don't think this planetoid is going to offer too much. Yeah, it's going to be pretty easy to make it self-sufficient, and sadly there's no sleetweed here. There is the poke shell though. It might be kind of fun to throw some poke shells in here, allow them to eat some of this excess polluted dirt. I mean, we're sitting at over 500 tons, which would be yet another sand supply. I'm not sure, but once again, we have plenty of options in the future of this series, and I want to hear all your suggestions in the comments below. I know this was a little bit of a hodgepodge episode with a little bit of exploration and not much else, but we're starting to get to the point where these episodes take longer and longer. I hope you understand. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did, and I'll talk to you soon.